Nintendo Switch has graced our presence for nearly 2 years now, and it's been phenomenal. Perfect? Of course not. Nothing is. But like I said, we're only 2 years in here. There's still a chance that we can get even closer to that impossible mark that is perfect. How will we do that? I think the answer to that question could lie in Nintendo's past consoles. Nintendo has been pretty actively deleting what little legacy Wii U has to its poorly advised name, but that's not going to stop me, darn it. Wii U still has some contributions in the world of Nintendo that have yet to be fully taken advantage of on Switch yet, and I'm going to talk about them. I mean, there's the gamepad. Well, yeah, the Switch's form factor is better in every way, but Nintendo Land was pretty neat. And there's Mario Maker. Mario Maker exists. Okay, the Wii U was mostly a bust in terms of notable contributions that stood the test of time, but there are a few smaller things that Wii U did that Switch has yet to nail, and in some cases attempt at all, with the first of which being streaming services. Wii U had a respectable list of available streaming services in comparison to Switch's current lineup that only includes Hulu and apparently YouTube pretty soon. In addition to these though, Wii U has Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Rhapsody, Crunchyroll, Napster, and a few other things that you probably wouldn't use. I personally wouldn't use streaming services on my Switch, but I know there's plenty of people that are asking for them. And while we're adding the must-haves like Netflix and Prime Video, why not add Twitch? Maybe step it up a bit and allow us content creators to stream directly from the Switch onto YouTube and Twitch. Probably never going to happen, but it'd undeniably be cool. And while I'm on the topic of things that I personally don't care much about, but know a lot of people do, Wii U also has support for voice chat through the console on a lot more games than Switch does. So maybe take that and expand on it with a party system. You know, just copy and paste the mobile app onto the console. Life's that simple, isn't it? Admittedly, Wii U doesn't have a whole lot to pull from, but as we get further back into Nintendo's console history, we find some pretty interesting ideas. So let's kick it up a little bit with the Wii U's predecessor, Nintendo Wii. The Wii established a fair amount of firsts for Nintendo, few of which would be accepted due to how contentious they were with a lot of gamers, except for one thing. One thing that people are still rallying for to this day, and that one thing is obviously Virtual Console. Now, Nintendo Switch Online kinda hampers the possibility of Virtual Console returning in the way that it existed on Wii, but it's still worth noting the fact that Wii is as good as Virtual Console ever got. It had a largely superior library above all of the other iterations of Virtual Console, with the only exception being the lack of Mother and Pokemon games, really. This was the first time that one console had such a vast library of legacy titles that were just a download away. Also, they ran on a much better emulator than what's available on Wii U and 3DS. Switch Online, in my opinion, would be infinitely better and worth an increased price even if they were to widen the scope of the classic library to games not only from the NES and the inevitable SNES era, but also from N64 like we did, their handheld titles like what can be found on Wii U and 3DS, as well as Wii games like on Wii U, or for the first time ever, GameCube titles. If the standalone classic line is any indication, Nintendo's emulation method has improved quite a bit, so put those skills to use and get those old games running on Switch Online. GameCube is a system that many would consider to be pretty alien to Nintendo these days, given the fact that it was amongst the upper echelon of the console in its day on a technological level. Even stranger than that though, GameCube had a fair amount of interesting third-party collaborations, and that's not just the blatant collaborations like Mario characters appearing in NBA Street or Boy Zelda appearing in Soul Calibur 2. The more subtle collabs that existed, like the Capcom 5 that fell apart, or the Capcom developed Zelda game that was actually pretty good, which I know is a GBA game, but same generation, so get off my back, theoretical commenter that won't comment because I'm calling them out until they decide to comment because I called them out and said they wouldn't comment, thereby hurling me into a never-ending theoretical loop questioning what may be. Or Sega's F-Zero game. We're beginning to see more collaborations in the vein of Soul Calibur 2 in the form of the Warriors games, Mario plus Rabbids, or even Bayonetta. But we can use more collaborations that aren't as heavy-handed. Maybe finish off that Capcom 5 thing. Wasn't it supposed to be 7? Or maybe just give Hello Games some money and staff to make a Star Fox game. Wait, who said that? I'm just gonna be straight with you guys. N64 has to be my least favorite Nintendo console of all time. And I know that's weird for somebody in my age group and everything, but for the most part, that console generation really feels like a glorified beta test for 3D game development. Kind of like how Wii U was a glorified beta for Nintendo Switch. That said, there's a fair amount of good buried in the N64 era, and there were some good ideas that I think could work pretty well in the modern day, better than they did back then even. Namely, I think the modularity that was attempted both in the form of the expansion pack and in the failed 64DD could serve as inspiration for something that I think Nintendo has been telegraphing for a while now. Switch could become a modular platform that upgrades in parts as time goes on, rather than being just the current thing that'll eventually die out when the next thing comes along. And I've talked about this idea in the past, but for those of you that are new here, I think Nintendo should utilize their supplemental computing patent to develop docks that up the horsepower of Switch in between full updates of the console itself. Of course, this idea would have a limited amount of support with developers, as the only way they would fully be able to utilize it is if they limit the games to only being played in dock mode. After all, the biggest hurdle in making games run well on Switch is the need to factor in undocked play. It's for this reason that I think everything about these half-step upgrades needs to be akin to the PS4 Pro in the way that the benefits are largely cosmetic and at times give better frame rates here and there. Nothing revolutionary. The big changes will need to come when new Switch handhelds are released a few years after the dock. I think this could potentially do two important things for the future of Nintendo handheld consoles, of which I think we all know there will be many after the success of the Switch. Breaking up the upgrade cycle for these console iterations, I think, would make it a lot more economical for a lot more people. Having the option to purchase, say, an upgraded dock in 2020 for $200 and then 3 years later in 2023 purchasing just the handheld for another $200 would be a way easier pill to swallow than just forking over the $400 all at once for a Switch 2. The second thing I think this approach could accomplish is to make more devs bring their games over to Switch. Some developers are going as far as making their games accessible only through cloud gaming, so I wouldn't be surprised to see those devs making their games playable by way of these dock upgrades. That's just my 2 cents on that. I'm not a computer engineer or anything. Did I mention I'm a certified industry insider? Like, just make it this basic ass controller.
That's the thing. I want the D-pad to be where the thumbstick is, so you literally can't use this. I totally could have got that platform. You can only use this left Joy-Con for having the D-pad in that spot.
And also, it's like, you're not like, they're not going to have to charge you the same amount of money for something that's like so situational.
Oh, take everything out. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's cheaper.
Yeah.
That would be very smart.
My idea for the SNES section is admittedly a bit left field, and it's not really something that the SNES necessarily does better, other than the fact that it was an exclusive thing at the time. After all, my absolute favorite aspect of the SNES isn't too dissimilar from the one that I brought up with the GameCube. Its third-party support is unmatched right now, especially by Switch. The third-party support wasn't only abundant on the SNES, it was tailored. It wasn't uncommon for a developer to make completely different versions of the same game, in theory, that were developed on a per-platform basis, and usually ended up being completely unrecognizable from each other quite a bit. But I'm not into the idea of repeating my suggestion for GameCube. The SNES had a very important contribution that's pretty hard to ignore: the shoulder buttons. And wouldn't you know it, in the lead up to the Nintendo NX reveal, there was another patent that made the rounds and became a part of what many believe Switch would turn out being. This patent was for shoulder buttons that doubled as scroll wheels, the application for which could make navigating UI more intuitive, sure, but more importantly, it's another input that can be used in designing games. An input that wouldn't even change the way we hold a controller or forego the controller overall like most motion and touch does. I, but a humble industry insider, am no game dev, but I am very aware of what game developers are capable of when given more options to create their games with. Even removing developers from the conversation, if we were given an Xbox Elite-like line of controllers with these scrollable shoulder buttons, that can open the door for custom universal button configurations, like Xbox, you know, Nintendo's best buds.
Did you say friendos?
I don't think anybody said friend.
Hey guys, Bob here. I'm here to talk to you about what the Switch could learn from the NES, and the first thing that came to my mind after spitballing with AJ for about 20 minutes was the D-pad. The first console to have a D-pad as we know it today was the Game & Watch, but the first home console to have this beautiful Nintendo-style D-pad was the NES, or the Famicom. What makes Nintendo's so unique is that it's all in one piece. It looks like a plus sign, but underneath, it's resting on top of a disc shape that's supported by a ball joint. Nintendo had this patent for years, although other consoles were able to get around this patent pretty easily. Sega, for example, just left the ball joint as a separate piece. Also, the disc shape is visible from the outside. Nintendo's patent expired in 2005, so competitors no longer need to find unique workarounds for the D-pad anymore. But that Nintendo-style D-pad has become so iconic for Nintendo that it doesn't even matter anymore if anybody else wants to use it anyway. Now, the reason that the Switch could learn from this is because it's the only Nintendo console since the Color TV game that doesn't have a D-pad on it. Instead, we have to use this uncomfortable split directional button system. Or, more practically, shell out the extra money for another controller, like one of these 8-bit Do controllers. And if you want to hear more about these, you can check out the video that I just put up on my channel in a link in a card over here or at the end of this video. Thanks, AJ, for putting up a link to that.
But those are my thoughts. What do you think Nintendo Switch could stand to learn from past Nintendo consoles? And for the comment challenge, which one of Nintendo's consoles was your all-time favorite? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd much appreciate it if you clicked the like button and shared this video with a friend who maybe owned a Nintendo console in the past or is probably planning to own one in the near future. Check out the description for links to Bob's stuff, our Discord community, optional ways to support the channel like our affiliate links, or clicking that join button. But most importantly, above all else, what you can do is subscribe and ring the bell for more videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. New podcasts every Saturday, also 4 p.m. Eastern Time, different channel, also linked in the description. Finally, we're going to start streaming every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Come hang out. Okay, that's it for me. See you next week.